So want to welcome everybody to our Guns to Gardens webinar this morning. I'm Pastor Libby Howe with the Wisconsin Council of Churches, and we're happy to host this event that was initiated by Pastor Jeff Wild, who's a retired pastor and blacksmith and passionate advocate of responsible gun ownership, but also of the ways that we might make a less violent world with fewer weapons too. So welcome to you, Jeff, as you're here.
I want to thank all of you for your participation today. And personally, I consider Guns to Garden tools and addressing firearm violence as a calling. In my retirement years, I first read the book, oh my goodness, is about gun violence by Shane Claiborne and Michael Martin, offered in 2019, and set the book down and thought, I can do this. I had a background in foundry work during my college years, but also engaging people from a biblical theological perspective as well. So I would be eager to support your efforts, especially since we're looking at a Dane County group here. To the best of my abilities, I want to offer whatever I can do. That would include a demonstration or a discussion or presentation, whatever might be helpful. After I decided to go public after the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict over about a year and a half ago now. And that kind of propelled me into this ministry. One opportunity that I took advantage was to participate in an action circle that was hosted through the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship. And I became acquainted with the group, but also the gun violence ministry coordinator, Pastor Deanna Hollis, who has led these groups. And this is a specialized ministry for her. And they, as a group, have done tremendous work. So I really appreciate Deanna's willingness to meet with us today as we try to build this movement in Wisconsin. So without any further introduction, Deanna will share more about the history of her ministry and what they have to offer to us in the near future. Thank you, Deanna.
I have to unmute. Now you go. How's that? Happy to be here and grateful for every single one of you and your willingness to work to end gun violence. I came into the Ministry of Gun Violence Prevention in 2016. I live in Texas, and it was in 2016 when Texas passed a law allowing guns on college campuses. And I didn't know how I was going to keep my daughter, who was a sophomore, safe. And all of her friends, responded to the law exactly how it was intended, and they saw it as an invitation to buy arms. And so out of my frustration, I joined Moms Demand Action. That was where I got my start, and then felt a call when the NRA came to Dallas to do this more officially, and that was when I was ordained to the role of gun violence prevention minister for the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship in 2019. So how we kind of got involved in Guns to Garden is I too had read, Mike and Shane's book and knew about their ministry, but it was really in 2021 whenever the Texas legislative session met, and once again they continue to listen to the extremes in our midst, and they did away with our permitless they created permitless carry. They did away with our permitting system that we had. And that is one of the things. Texas used to be known for some of the best gun laws in the country because we had the most gun owners, and we understood this idea of responsible gun ownership. Responsibility and gun owner went hand in hand. But the gun lobby has been successful, and the gun industry has been able to flood our communities with weapons. So out of frustration and watching all the efforts get everything get dismantled, I was like, what can I do? And so I went and I bought a chop saw and was in contact with Mike Martin and dismantled. The first gun that I dismantled was for a friend of mine. It was his service weapon. He was a Navy doctor. It was his service weapon in when he was stationed during the Iraqi war. And so I saw there was a lot of emotions, that came with dismantling weapons for people, some positive, some negative. And I also discovered it was a little bit harder because it was a handgun, and Mike had now 7 guns he wanted me to dismantle, and I was like, I'm going to need some help. So I called him and said, can you give me a little bit more guidance? And he just happened to have an event that he was doing in Colorado at Community UCC in Boulder, and invited me to come. And so it was at that event that the model that we share with folks on how to hold a guns to gardens industry was born. This church had a mass shooting, if you remember, in May of 2021, just at the King Super grocery store, where we had been in lockdown, and this was kind of the first mass shooting that really caught the public's attention again. And this was just blocks from their church, and not knowing what to do or how to respond, and again having this overwhelming sense of helplessness. They decided to hold a safe surrender event in which they invited people from their community to bring in unwanted guns. And the very first person who showed up was an old woman in her 80s who could barely drive her car and was on oxygen and had these old guns from her husband, who was long deceased. And she didn't know what to do with them. She didn't want to return them to the market. She wanted to make sure that they were not used for further harm. And so this was an answer to prayer for her. There were 2 sisters that were walking in front of the event, and every time a gun was chopped up, the church was ringing a bell that day. And the sisters said it was just, they could feel their bodies release and the tension, the sadness be healed from their brother who had committed suicide with a gun, had used a gun to take his life years before, and had wished there was something like this for them to be able to have as a way to get rid of their guns. There were families that showed up, multiple generations, dads whose children were begging them, Dad, we don't want this gun in our home. He thought he bought it in order to protect them, but they realized with all the school shootings, this was no longer safe. So, like I said, it just brought so much healing, not only to everybody who was there, the gun owners, the families, the community, the people who were the church, as a way to be able to take action in the face of all of the tragedy that we're exposed to every day. So Guns to Gardens is a grassroots movement where citizens across the United States are safely and anonymously surrendering their unwanted guns. And churches can facilitate this for them by having chop saws and then taking these leftover parts and forging them into garden tools, and to be able to create life out of something that used to be an instrument for death. It is Isaiah 2:4 brought to life. It is how we can embody this biblical vision. and create beloved community. So, like I said, this was kind of the ministry that Raw Tools is what Mike Martin started, the organization Raw Tools, and they've been doing this for about 10 years, but it's really kind of, taken off in when it shifted to kind of this role in congregations and something that congregations can do. And so that's what we in the Peace Fellowship have found, that the way that we can help congregations, our vision is to nurture this national network of congregations that have a regular ministry of dismantling unwanted guns in the community on a regular basis. And so we have found that the best way to do this is through what we call action circles, in which people gather on Zoom calls, just like how we are here, and we learn with and from one another on best practices of how congregations can do this. The action circles run for 5 weeks, and we go from giving you all the practical logistical information, like what type of saws you need, how many you need, what type of volunteers that you need, how to best set up your parking lot in order to facilitate this event safely. What if you want to offer gift cards, how to order gift cards, what amounts you should offer for as thank yous for gift cards. One of the things that we've learned throughout this process is we don't use the word buyback, because we are not doing a true gun buyback. In that, in a gun buyback, there is the assumption of a transfer of ownership. That there's a gun owner, you're handing them money, and now you are taking their gun. The way that we do this is it's through a drive-through process, and the gun owner is present the whole time. And so what the church is doing is they're performing a service for the gun owner of dismantling their guns. In that kind of the legality which we're falling under is that gun owners are free to do with their guns as they so choose. And if they want to have it destroyed, that they can do this. And I've participated in 2 of these Safe Surrenders event. The first was at Boulder, and then I also went to one last March that Raw Tools was holding in conjunction with the Denver Broncos. So it was at Bronco Stadium, and there were probably well over 100 cars that particular day. And what struck me was the gratitude from everybody who showed up that day. I think when we think about doing these events, oftentimes people are so worried about, looking like we're taking guns away or we're trying to take guns away. But what we don't realize is our country is awash in guns. We have, it's estimated, over 4 million guns in the hands of private citizens. The gun industry is producing and putting into the marketplace around 15 to 20 million guns every year. So just to compare, that's what's manufactured. That's just what's manufactured. Compare that to how many automobiles are manufactured. It's around 6 million. Total vehicles, which include commercial trucks, buses, are around 11 million. So the difference between a gun and any other product that is made is that a gun is non-consumable, which means it doesn't wear out over time. You don't use it up. Even cars and washing machines are likely to wear out, get destroyed, and you need to buy a new one. Guns last for decades. They outlive the life of the owners. The gun that my husband has is a 1904 Springfield, and it still works. So what do we do with all these guns? The option is you return them to the marketplace. And so oftentimes what happened is we found is there are homes that have either inherited guns, bought guns thinking it was going to be a good source of protection, and then realized that they actually are creating a more dangerous situation by bringing that gun into their home than they were ever going to be able to use it in a case of self-protection. That we have guns that have been used by family members to take their own lives that then get returned to the family. Like I said, we have children that can get hold of guns and unintentionally shoot others. We have like a toddler shoot someone in this country every other day. School shootings, the number one cause of school shootings, over 50% are students that are too old, too young to legally purchase a gun. They're under the age of 18. And so that means they've received their gun from somebody who has a gun owner who is not properly securing or storing their gun. And so we can get those guns out of homes and provide the families, the gun owners, a safe way to destroy these guns. And again, have that assurance that it is not going to be used for further harm, which they don't get by returning it to the marketplace. You know, they don't know what's going to happen to these weapons. So we believe that, again, that this is the ministry for the church, not only, you know, because it's how we can embody the Isaiah vision, which is, you know, somewhat a biblical mandate, I would think that we have. We also handle, you know, again, the practical aspect of just how do we dispose of these guns. But we also, you know, have seen the pastoral aspect that we can bring to this with oftentimes all those emotions that are attached to the guns, to be able to add ceremony and to serve as witnesses, to be able to listen and have compassion as we listen to the stories of the people who have these guns and they want them to be dismantled, and offering again for them this life-saving option. So when as I told you, the second set of guns that I destroyed was those 7 guns that Mike referred to me. And it was a woman who they had inherited them. And these guns had been used, they were the father's guns, and he had used them to torment the family. And so this woman, I actually had problems with my saw that day. I kept blowing the power in the church because I didn't have it set up quite right. And she was started praying, please let these get dismantled. Please let this get dismantled. And was so taken by that ability that they were these weapons that had caused so much harm were going to be transformed and to be used into instruments for life. So there's the pastoral aspect that we can provide in healing. And there's also the prophetic voice that we can provide. You know, the vision of citizens voluntarily ridding their homes and communities of unwanted guns turns the gun industry's myth that we are safer with guns everywhere on its head. And for churches to facilitate this process is to show that God's love stands on the side of saving lives and preventing gun violence. It also can be a way then that we can show our lawmakers, you know, this can be done. They can then have courage to be able to move towards being able to establish more gun safety laws that can require things like safe storage that can keep us safe for those. So when people do have guns that they want to have, you know, that we assure that they are safely stored and out and away from the hands of people that could have them. So I'm going to pause, I think, there and see if there are any questions.
My question is, when are action circles offered? Are they scheduled for each group that wants to do it, or several groups?
Yeah, so we are kind of running them about one a quarter. Our next one starts next Thursday, which is March 2nd at y'all are Central Time, so 11:30 Central Time for 1 hour. We generally say to plan for about 2 hours, one for one a week, one for 1 hour to be in the group, and then an hour to do some preparation resources that we provide you to look at those resources. And then we really use the group time as kind of a learning time. Like, what questions do you have? If there's more information that we need to give you, like I said, to be able to learn with and from each other. So the sign up is, you can do that at presbyterianpeacefellowship.org. They sign up closes on Wednesday. We've joined to become part of a national group that have realized, kind of our witness can be stronger together. So there's a National Guns to Gardens group, and we've been establishing National Guns to Gardens Day, in which we're trying to hold safe surrender events across the country. And that next day is going to be June 10th and Saturday, June 10th. And we promote any level of dismantling guns. Some congregations start small, and they do like a private ceremony of some guns that they know that are in their midst. Others, like you guys, have Jeff as a resource and somebody who really has done this and knows what to do, so they feel ready to be able to take on inviting an open invitation to the community. And so there's all kinds of levels that can happen on June 10th. But so far we've had go through our action circles over 160 people that are representing, I think I said congregations, which that wasn't true. I think it's more like 70 congregations that those people represent, and 8 denominations. So we've had Presbyterians, Episcopals, Lutherans, Methodist, I said Presbyterian, I'm forgetting Catholics. We've also had and private organizations. So we've had about 4 private, nonprofit organizations that have come through different groups, including in Colorado. They also have it's an interfaith group that works to end gun violence. And in Louisville, Kentucky, they also created an interfaith group to be able, and so we've had Baptists. I left out the Baptist that came in the Louisville, Kentucky group. And so far, the Guns to Gardens events that I know that have been held in congregations have been in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Colorado. There's been several in the Denver area. One's happening, I think, this weekend, actually. Like I said, Louisville, Kentucky, Oakland, California, Sandy, Utah, Albuquerque, New Mexico. There's a group in St. Louis that's working on doing something. They were in our last action circle. We've had Columbus, Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, Euclid, Ohio. There's a really strong group, God Before Guns, that have been very active in Ohio for many years. So that's what got such a good response in Ohio. We had one in Georgia. We have a group in Florida that's working to do something. We've had Baltimore. And I'm working on something in Dallas. So like I said, it's growing, and everybody is, figuring out how they can best do it in their community. Yep.
Deanna, our group last year was talking about how to best get the attention for these surrenders among particularly teenage gang members, where there seems to be, particularly in the upper Midwest, a lot of drive-by shootings, and Madison is no stranger to those. And we were just trying to brainstorm, maybe you've seen some attempts to initiate your program among churches, particularly in our.
Yeah, so one of the things that's actually one of the weeks that we have is a conversation on race and guns. And I'll tell you that that's a little bit tricky in the sense that we want to just think that they're going to turn over their weapons and get rid of them. But I would counter, just like white gun owners, they want their guns, and so they're not interested in really participating in safe storage, or in these surrender events. What I can tell you is two things. One, this is where safe storage becomes so important because, as you said, they're teenagers. They shouldn't have access to guns. So if they're getting stolen guns, then again, I hold that on the responsibility of a gun owner. If you're going to own a gun, you need to be responsible for how you store it so that nobody gets a hold of it. And the other thing is, this is where it's really important to support the work of violence interrupters, because as the violence interrupters become involved, as we teach things like conflict resolution, restorative justice practices, things like how to solve conflict in other ways besides guns, that's when you're going to have a desire to then give up their gun. So this actually happened in Louisville, and so they've been able to partner with folks who are actively doing kind of violence interruption. They had a gun that was, a young kid had, and the violence interrupter got it away from him. But then what was he going to do with it? And so particularly, I'll just tell you there were laws in Louisville, and I don't know where this may not be the same where you are, but he was like, I can't throw it away, I can't. He was trying to destroy it. So he just thought, well, I'm going to take it to the police station. They'll destroy this, right? Well, when he went to the police station, the answer was, well, we need the kid. And he said, I'm not giving you the kid, right? I did all this work. I've got you, a kid who's now no longer interested in participating in violence, and you're going to punish the kid for this, for giving their gun over? Absolutely not. I'm not going to give you the kid. And so therefore they wouldn't take the gun. So he was left with, well, now what am I going to do with this gun? And he said he tried everything. He told me, he's like, you mean you can chop it up? I said, yes, I can. We can do this for you. So that's how you want to, how this is going to happen, is you need to be able to be in partnership with the folks who are doing work in those communities. And then as they end up transforming the community through things like resources, different, like I said, having conflict resolution skills, trauma, because that's a lot of what's happening is these communities are in survival mode, and when they're in survival mode, they don't always have the resources to solve conflict and problems in ways that are healthy. And so we need to have those things in place, and then they will no longer want their guns. But that is what, I talked to a violence interrupter in San Antonio, and I asked him that, kind of that question, is this something that could be helpful? And he said, generally, no, because they feel like they need that gun because the other guy's got a gun, right? Like that's the gun industry's myth. It's no different for them than it is for every white person, who feels like they've got to arm themselves in order to protect themselves because other people have guns. It's the same thing. they're just don't have other problem solving skills and are in situations that put them in survival mode more than the privilege and the affluence that most white people have. That's the only things that's separating the violent crime levels in homicide rates that are happening in communities of color. But gun ownership is the same, you know, and one of the things we talk about is how, you know, traditionally there has been laws that have kept people of color from owning guns. So we want to be very careful that as white people, we don't ever give the impression that we are trying to take guns away from communities of color, and instead want to make sure that we are looking at our own reliance on guns and how can we, you know, make sure that our communities, if there's guns, that they're safely stored, and that we're really looking at how do we understand how we resolve conflict in our use of violence.
Could you talk a little bit about the difference between buyback and surrender? It seems like a real interesting motivation, and I'm wondering, is there a difference between that? Are certain individuals more likely to surrender out of their own moral background, whereas others are really interested in $50 or $100 or whatever? Could you talk to that a little bit?
I can, and I can tell you, you know, when I first started, I was kind of like that. It was like, well, if you want the gun, you know, does $50, $100, $200 really matter? But the evidence, the data out there says it does matter, because a lot of times people have their resources tied up in a gun, and whether we like it or not, it has value. And so that resource can really make a difference in some people's lives to be able to receive that. So the national group, the folks there, and several of them do traditional buybacks. And so what they have found is by offering them oftentimes around holidays or celebrations, you know, it really tends to bring in more guns, because people need money, you know, to buy gifts, or to, you know, 4th of July, even to be able to have a party, you know, that these guns can actually do this. I will tell you, I was even shocked in my, when I was at Broncos Stadium, and the first guy who came in that day was a very wealthy man. We were having a nice conversation about his brand new car that he was in, and how it was, you know, the equivalent of a Lexus. And he had a gun that he was bringing that day that he'd had for over 20 years, that came with a car that he bought. It was in the glove compartment. It was a tiny, tiny little gun. And as we sat through and went through this and heard all about, you know, he was a very wealthy man. And when we got to the end, I just said, I was like, well, we'll see what they'll give for it. I said, I don't know. Sometimes some guns don't, you know, for whatever reason. If it was more like a BB gun, like a handgun BB gun, it might not bring in the money. And you know what he said to me? And I said, you might get $50. If he didn't get $50, he was taking the gun and leaving. So, you know, I think as Christians would like to have the moral aspect, but if we really want to make an impact in our community, we have to remove kind of our judgment around that, and just be grateful that they brought the gun. And some people will do it without, you know, in Boulder, you know, which was a wealthy community, and it was right after a trauma. They offered gift cards, and about half the people said, no, thank you, you can have them back. That's not going to happen, you know, everywhere. It's not going to happen if what you're really after is kind of bringing in guns that are in homes where they're more likely to not be safely stored, where having that money is going to be really, really important. So, and again, how we phrase it to get around kind of the legalities of a gun buyback, because like I said, that can be problematic in some states, but I don't know if Wisconsin, if you're required to have a background check on all gun transfers.
No,
Okay,
Hmm.
that's just like we got away from that because it was, like I said, it was raising kind of the ire of the law enforcement in some communities. But we offer the gift cards as a thank you for choosing to donate their leftover parts, because once the gun is dismantled, it's no longer considered a gun. So we thank them for donating their parts and for choosing to surrender, because you know, I feel like Southwest Airlines, we know you have a choice when you fly, but we know you have a choice. So you have to realize that particularly if you get any type of pushback around, you know, taking people's guns away, we're not, you know, everybody always has a choice to return their gun to the market. But what you'll find is people don't want that choice. You know, they really don't want to have to, they're worried about what's going to happen to it. And so they like the option that it's going to be destroyed. And that money can be enough of a financial incentive to push some people in, because sometimes people will show up with 10, 14, 20 guns, you know, it adds up. You can end up giving away thousands of dollars to an individual, and that really does can, you know, it's a lot to walk away from. But I will say, as far as the national Guns to Gardens movement goes, that is to be able to kind of use the name. One of the things they say is that all guns do get destroyed regardless of value and regardless of historical value. So that happens sometime. So be clear, you know, somebody's going to bring a gun in that can be worth thousands of dollars because of either historical or just the value of the gun. And I saw that in Denver at the Bronco one. The gun was like an AR-15 style assault rifle with gold tips. They said it was a $5,000 gun. And that particular day, because of some of the issues that were there, you know, there were people who weren't as into kind of Mike's model of everything being destroyed away. And I watched them go like, we have to destroy this. And it's like, yes, that person came to this event because they wanted the gun destroyed, right? And that actually happened in Louisville too, that there's a guy who inherited guns from his father was a collector. So he has thousands upon thousands of dollars worth of guns, but he wants them destroyed. So, and he didn't even take money in that case. So there's going to be the variety, but if you really want to be, the data shows if you really want to get to the community, that offering kind of the financial incentive is going to make a difference in how many you get.
Deanna, when I approached the church council, where my wife and I are members now, about their willingness to host a safe surrender event, they discussed it and sent me back a long list of questions. I felt like I had to convince them, which wasn't the case. They were supportive, but a lot of questions came out of it. Can you identify what frequently asked questions are?
Yeah, I think the two biggest ones are pushback, you know, like who's going to show up. And as a general rule, this has not been a problem, mainly because we really lean into that this is voluntary and these are unwanted guns. And all gun owners can get into that we're trying to keep people safe, right? So that's generally not the problem. What oftentimes happens is, and this may be something that would happen in Wisconsin because you don't require a background check on all transfers, is that somebody may show up and try to do like a counter buyback, and that they'll offer $50 more or $25 more or something. They may set up across the street or down the way or something like that. The two best responses to that is what New Mexico does is they take donuts and they walk out and offer the person some donuts. You know, they say, fellow, you know, great, we're happy you're here, but have some donuts, you know, and so that diffuses any type of resistance that may come. The other thing is your people won't generally do that because like the one that happened, I can't remember where, if it was Utah or whatever, but anyway, they said, we're giving them to teachers. That's not who's coming to our event, right?
Yeah.
Like those folks already know that those options exist. The people that are coming, they want it destroyed. They want what you're doing. So that has turned out to be kind of a non-issue, you know, just because we're really careful with that language. The other big thing is insurance. And we don't have a good answer for this. Some insurance companies are sure, fine, whatever. You know, others have said absolutely not. And others have operated under the don't ask, don't tell. There's the way we have set up the program is by what you'll say in your publicity is that all guns must be unloaded and stored in the trunk of your car. So that's kind of like some insurance companies have said, well, are there going to be ammunition? And as soon as they find out there's no ammunition, great, fine, it's not a problem, right? The gun's just a hunk of metal. So you want to make sure you don't have any ammunition. If people have ammunition and they don't know what to do with it, what you might do is check with a local shooting range or your police and ask, what do we tell folks to do with this ammunition? The next thing that would happen is somebody might have ammunition in the gun, and that creates a safe, you know, an unsafe situation. And so you just say, I'm sorry, we can't help you with this gun at this time. You need to take it to a shooting range and have it cleared. And then the third most dangerous thing is that you have power tools on site, right? Like somebody could get their finger chopped off with a chop saw. So I think it's a matter of the church kind of accessing that level of risk. Certainly with the volunteers, you know, you can get permission forms and things that say we accept this level of risk that are taking on. The gun owner is responsible, you know, for the gun as long as it's a gun. And so if you don't have, I would offer a church, do they have policies in place that don't allow guns on their campus? If they do, what's the difference? You know, you got a gun owner bringing a gun. You're willing to do that at any other time. So I think they're assuming a risk already, and they should, you could push back on that. But generally, we've been working on insurance, and I will just say, I've been disappointed in that the congregation here, the quote they got for a one-day event was $6,000. So they're willing to pay it. The Episcopals, their insurance, most places I understand go through the diocese, and the diocese has said fine. So again, it can depend on your denomination. As Presbyterians, we all have individual insurance, and so it's a little more pushback. And again, depending on your area. So like I said, I don't have a good answer for it. Differs in how you choose to handle it, but we do say, you know, if you want to, there's going to be risks, and it's, you know, our kids are at risk going to school every day. Our communities are at risk. So we can't go to parades. We can't do anything. So this is really a very safe event, and it might be a risk well worth taking on.
Deanna, what about police advance notice and permits from police saying that we're not conducting illegal activities, or we're not housing weapons or things like that?
I haven't had the second half of that question, but yes, you know, notifying your police that you're going to do this event at this time is fine. Yet police get tricky. They have laws that govern them, and they can sometimes in some places they try to discourage it. You're in an environment where Jeff's already done this, so I'm assuming those relationships exist with the police. The thing that is different than a buyback, because see, here's the other problem with the buyback is that people, and why we don't use that word, is because people collect arsenals, right? Like if you're taking in a working gun and you're not destroying them in that moment, you are creating an arsenal. But what we're doing is it's one car at a time, and you don't, they're getting destroyed right then and right there. So you are not collecting an arsenal. The most kind of at risk you're having is that gun owners are showing up with guns in your parking lot. But again, they own the gun at all times. The church is never taking on that ownership. And that's where this is different than what law enforcement might be used to experiencing or hearing about.
I can share a bit about my experience in Dane County. The first is the Dane County Sheriff is extremely supportive of this effort. And second, the city police department, I contacted the West Side Lieutenant, met with him, and he was also very supportive. Church Council of the congregation asked for a police presence. Initially, they were asking for someone who was plain clothes to be there. But the police department refused that.
Yeah.
And they had a police officer, they provided us with a police officer on site during the event. The police officer did not stay for the entire event. Apparently there was a lot on their plates that morning. So they've been, my experience in Madison is they're quite accommodating. And one thing we could do in Dane County is we could bring in the sheriff to meet with us sometime and talk with him, and just to build that relationship. So that's a possibility too.
I'm not seen, but I'll be heard again. George Carlson. I know this is very motivated by safety for our communities. And I'm wondering if it's ever been paired with the issue for those that don't want to give their guns in to be destroyed or dismantled, but would like a gun lock. Do you ever offer gun locks at these events for those who wish to keep their firearms?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are, we also have gun safety cards that God Before Guns, that group in Ohio that I mentioned, that they'll provide. So they also pass out gun safety cards. They ask if there's more guns and if they'll, here you go, and use it as an opportunity to talk about safe storage. Absolutely.
Good. Thank you.
It's near 12 o'clock, and I think we should honor your time as well as Deanna and Libby's. I hope that you'll consider moving forward and participate in the action circles led by Deanna starting next week. They're well worth it. I just want to also finish by showing you, this is a hand spade. Jerry Tooze is in on this call, and he is a wood turner, and he's kind enough to make the handles for these, and I think they're quite beautiful myself, and Jerry and I are both getting better at this. So this actual tool came from a double barrel shotgun that a banker, Oak Bank in Fitchburg, surrendered to me about a month ago. And it was a double barrel shotgun that his grandfather gave to him, and he hunted with it. His name is Bob Gorsuch, as a child growing up. And the exchange took place in the parking lot of the bank where I bank. He pulled it out of his car, wasn't in a case, which immediately sent shivers up my spine, and handed it over to me. And I thought, boy, in a bank parking lot, this is not a good idea. But he said it was hard for him to give it up because his grandfather gave it to him. So I noticed you see a lot of sentimental attachments to firearms. But I took in 4 of these spades. I was able to make 8 hand spades from it. And he has 4 children, and he's going to give them to each of his children. And he was just delighted, incredibly grateful and supportive of that. So it's transformational what we're doing here. Thank you for your participation, and I'm going to follow up with you. Maybe you, Dan, after you touch base with the people at First United Methodist, with Jerry and George, and see where we go from here. And so hopefully we'll move forward in some way. Thank you, Deanna, and thank you, Libby, Pastor Howe, for
Yep. Thank you too, Jeff.
bringing us together.
Oh.
Okay. Peace be with all of you.